Sakshi Manasakshi. I am Priya Goteti and welcome to Immigration Talk Show with Attorney Prashanthi Reddy from Law Offices of Prashanthi Reddy PLLC. Please note that Sakshi TV now has 5 immigration shows: Monday with Somi Reddy, Tuesday with Kaveti Law Firms, Wednesday with Prashanthi Reddy, Thursday with Chand Parvatineni, and Friday with Banu Ilender. Please tune in to ask your questions. If you are an immigration attorney and would like to join our special shows, please email us at usa@sakshi.com or call us at 866-725-7441. Please note that the Sakshi TV program, whatever we are doing, is just only for general information purpose only and not a legal advice. If Sakshi TV or its agents are not responsible for the use of this information. If you need special assistance or legal advice, please reach out to the attorney directly. So Ms. Prashanthi Reddy requires no extra information or introduction from her. For any consultation, please reach out to reddy.esq.com for legal advice. So without any further delay, please welcome Prashanthi Reddy to our show. Hi, Prashanthi Reddy. How are you?
I'm good, Andy. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. And Ms. Prashanthi Reddy, now we are having elections. It's like election season all over the place, and people always get this year what would be the new immigration rules that would be impacting the H-1Bs or the students. So today let's discuss about the topic like the impact of 2024 elections on immigration rules. So with that, like how was the immigration rules like before when Biden was like ruling in the government? So how was the immigration rules? What were the impact that we had on the visas?
Right. So I guess in today's presentation, we'll talk about, what the impact would be on U.S. immigration under the Democrats and under the Republicans. And in order to do that, we'll have to go back a little bit and see how immigration was under the previous Republican and Democratic governments, right? So I think that's a good question. Let's first look into what immigration was under the present Biden government, since that's a Democratic government, and we can expect the same if the Democrats come to power, right? So it's important to look at how they're treating immigration in the present under Biden's administration. So basically, under Biden's administration, of course, they started off with problem with the border. Of course, that's a huge problem always. In response to the record migration encounters in 2022, 2023, we know there was a lot of people coming to the border and seeking asylum. The Biden administration, and the reason there were so many people coming to the border is because under the previous Trump administration, there was very little asylum given and very few people came in because of the restrictive policies under Trump. So under the Biden administration, obviously the border is a problem. Both Republicans and Democrats don't want, a flood of people coming to the border because then, they don't have the jobs, they don't have the resources to take care of all those people. So under the Biden administration, they kind of revamped border enforcement policies. They combined incentives for arrival at ports of entry with stricter enforcement between, at border crossings. And they also tried to establish some temporary pathways for some nationalities. So for some South American countries, they established like a special program where, for example, Nicaraguans could come to the US to work under some temporary visa. So they hope that by enforcing these kind of policies, there'll be less people coming at the border and there'll be more people coming legally by applying at their home country. And they also, increased enforcement at the border. They, gave some incentives. But despite all these efforts, the challenges still remain even now. For instance, 12,000 unauthorized migrants arrived in the US in a single day on December 19th. So all the governments find it very difficult to, restrict border entries. So that's a little bit about the border under Biden. Also, under the Biden administration, they restored prosecutorial discretion. What is prosecutorial discretion? Basically, while the border, when people come into the country and if they're illegal in the country, you cannot really, there are millions of illegal immigrants. And because of that, the court dockets are overflowing. And, if they try to remove everybody, that's not possible. So they're trying to reserve the time of the courts for people who are criminals. So example, if they have committed a felony, they're trying to remove them rather than removing people who have not committed any crime and are not a threat in any way to, the United States. So this is called prosecutorial discretion. They have the discretion to decide who to proceed against, who to file removal orders against, and who not to, who to just they'll just allow them to they'll close their cases. So that's prosecutorial discretion. For example, in 2023, ICE dismissed or paused 119,000 cases, and immigration judges removed 208,000 non-priority cases from the docket. So that frees up the time for cases that really need to be for illegal aliens or immigrants who really need to be removed from the country, for example, for felons or dangerous, people who are dangerous. But however, despite all these efforts of prioritizing who to prosecute and who not to, courts remain overwhelmed, mainly because during COVID, the courts didn't function at all. So there's a huge backlog. There's, about 523,000 cases now. And they continue to, the backlogs continue to increase. With reference to legal immigration under Biden, that is at new heights. And it rebounded since Trump, right? Because under Trump, the policies were so restrictive that even legal immigration suffered. So in 2023, 1.2 million immigrants became lawful permanent residents. So 1.2 permanent residents, 1.2 people were granted green cards, and 10.4 million non-immigrant visas were issued. And also, because of the pandemic, certain systems were modernized. So, for example, green card interviews were being taken online. Court interviews were taken online. And because of this, they were able to move the backlog a little faster because they didn't require people to actually come in. So there were faster visa approvals and faster, but despite all this, still problems remain. There's a significant backlog. There's a green card backlog of 7.6 million because this is because of the unavailability of visa numbers, right? And USCIS has more than 9 million pending applications. But despite all this, with reference to H-1B, there's good news. They introduced some changes under the H-1B visa lottery system, and this curbed fraud and helped the system function more smoothly. They stopped the incentive to file multiple registrations under the visa lottery system, and this year has been a very successful lottery year where there were hardly any duplicate registrations. Otherwise, previously, there were so many multiple registrations that very few applications got picked. Also, the State Department started a new pilot program. They're trying out a new program of visa revalidation, where if you already have a visa in the US, you don't have to leave the country to get your visa extended if it's expiring, but you can get it extended within the country itself by mailing your passport in. This is visa revalidation, existed in the past, but then they removed it because of national security concerns. Now they're looking to bring it back, and this will again free up the consulates to issue new visas. Also, they have started this year.
Yeah. Is it the same thing as stamping? Is it the
Yes, visa stamping. Visa
Okay.
revalidation is really visa stamping.
Okay.
Also, this year, what they did is, and they've been continuing to do that, and this year they made it permanent, but they have started a visa waiver program, interview waiver program, which means that if you're again getting an extension, you don't have to go for an interview. Suppose you're on a H1 and you're getting an extension of your visa, you don't have to go for an interview. You can simply put your passport in the Dropbox, and they will, send you the visa in the mail. So you don't have to go for an interview. That also frees up the consulate, to take up other cases. So that's a little bit of what happened under Biden this year, in this term, last 4 years.
So how was under the Trump, what was the changes or the immigration rules that have been changed under the Trump previously?
Right. Yeah. So under Trump administration, immigration was really, there was a setback for immigration in many, many ways. Immigration was curtailed to a great extent. So the Trump administration banned nationals from many Muslim countries from coming into the US. So there's a complete ban on, I think, 7 or 8 Muslim-dominated countries. This was a significant shift from previous governments where there was no ban based on religion. Under the Trump government, there's a reduction in refugee admissions, decrease in asylum applications. Asylum almost stopped, came to almost to a standstill. There were many more arrests. People who were found illegal in the country were arrested. So a lot of resources were, taken away from ICE, and they could not focus on people who, committed crimes because they were busy arresting everyone, even those people that were harmless. They canceled DACA and put an end to TPS. DACA is basically deferred action for children. So children who came and did their high school here and they were out of status for no fault of their own were given special treatment under the Obama administration, and they were not deported. And they were also given employment authorization, and they were allowed to travel. This benefit was removed under Trump. There's also something called TPS, Temporary Protected Status, and nationals of many countries, Nicaragua, Sudan, Haiti, were given this temporary protected status, which means that they were not forced to go back to their country because there were problems in their home country and they couldn't go back. So they were given a temporary stay from going back to their country, and they were given work authorization. So this TPS was removed completely by Trump. Also, he increased enforcement and reduced legal immigration. This is a concern for all of us, affects all of us who are in the US and who aspire to come to the US. He revamped enforcement, 52% increase in charging documents were issued. So 52% were charged with in removal proceedings. There was an increase of 52%. 17% increase in applications, 17% decrease, sorry, in applications for green cards, stricter public charge rule. So he had a rule, he expanded the public charge rule. So basically the public charge rule is if you're considered to be a public charge, if USCIS comes to the conclusion that you might become a public charge, meaning that you might use government money to sustain yourself, then they won't give you a green card. So they want to make sure that you don't do that. And they do, some due diligence. Under Trump, it became much stricter, and that public charge rule was expanded for, and it affected many more people. As a result of which, almost anyone who's filing for, especially a family-based green card, if you're filing for your parents, for example, since they're retired, they would most probably be considered to be a potential public charge because they're not earning. luckily for us, the public charge rule, the expanded public charge rule was halted by the courts. So, that's that. And also under him, there was maximum amount of H-1B denials. Least number of visas were issued. So there was issues for both legal as well as people coming illegally. So it affected all kinds of immigration.
Got it. So going forward, what it is likely to be like if it's under the government of Democratic, how it would gonna be for the immigration?
So just before we do that, I just did a quick poll on my LinkedIn actually, with reference to some questions, what people think about what will happen with the present election and how important it is for immigration policies. And the first question I asked was how do you think the 2024 election will impact US immigration policies? So 57% said that there will be major changes. So majority said that there will be major changes in immigration. 24% said that there'll be minor adjustments. 10% said no significant impact, and 10% were unsure. Also, another question I asked was, what aspect of immigration policy do you find most crucial in this election? So what is most important to them from an immigration viewpoint in this election? 43% said H-1B visa reforms was the most important to them. 18% said border security was important. 32% said green card processing was important. And 7% said DACA was important to them. So just with that little tidbit, let me go into what to expect, what the 2024 US election means for the future. So if Kamala Harris, that's representing the Democratic stance, would likely advocate for more inclusive immigration policies, hopefully focusing on pathways to citizenship, and humanitarian considerations. So let's hope that there's something will happen under Kamala Harris that hasn't happened under Biden. Also, if she has majority of the House and the Senate, there might be some chance of comprehensive immigration reform. Trump, on the other hand, would emphasize stringent border controls and would reduce legal immigration as well. So there's a fundamental difference between both their approaches. They're the opposite. So, it's going to have immigration either way will have a big impact, depending on which party gets elected. So, it's important that we watch this election closely and vote appropriately, because if immigration is important to you, then it'll have a great impact depending on which party comes to power. What happens if Kamala Harris wins? I think we can expect comprehensive immigration reform, and we're hoping that will happen if she comes to power, and if Harris has the opportunity, meaning that she has to have majority in both the House and Senate for any immigration reform to take place. Biden has not had that opportunity. Let's hope things change under Harris. If she doesn't, then I guess it'll remain status quo. What was happening under Biden will happen under Harris. They'll try to do as much as possible using executive orders if they're not able to change the law.
Okay.
DACA recipients will, I think, continue to get benefits. Again, DACA, unfortunately, it's in the court, so we have to wait and see what the courts say with reference to the Dreamers or DACA. With reference to, she's likely to restore asylum protections and continue and restore asylum protections, or continue to grant asylum. Focus on family reunification, so not separating families at the border like Trump did. With reference to employment-based immigration, She may advocate for reforms to streamline the employment-based immigration process, addressing the backlogs, improving opportunities for high-skilled immigrants is what we're hoping she'll do. And also she's likely to continue TPS. On the other hand, Trump will again focus on border security and construction of the wall. So a lot of money will be extended on constructing a wall. There will be restrictive asylum and refugee policies, and most likely very few asylum cases will get approved. There will be strict immigration enforcement, enhancing immigration enforcement will be a central focus of the Republican government, with policies aimed at increasing deportations, cracking down on undocumented immigrants, etc. With reference to merit-based immigration, Trump could push for a shift from family-based immigration, completely remove family-based immigration, and advocate a merit-based immigration similar to what Canada has. He said that in the previous term that he wanted to do that, and I think his intention is to continue to push towards that. Again, remember, nothing can be done even by Trump, positive or negative, unless he has full majority in the House and the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
He will further limit legal immigration. This he can do without going for congressional approval, because he can do this through USCIS enforcement, which he did even last time by decreasing the number of H-1B approvals, increasing the number of denials, etc. So he can limit legal immigration. He might seek to further limit by legal immigration by reducing visa programs, imposing stricter eligibility criteria for work visas and for green cards. He wanted to end birthright citizenship. So if you're born here, you will not automatically be a citizen. Again, he needs to have congressional approval to do that, but that's his intention. If he can, he will do it. Very important, something called the H-1B visa wage rule. The rule was published first under his administration. Luckily, it got struck down by the court, but it was only struck down for procedural reasons. So if he comes back, he will reintroduce it so that the court can't strike it down. If this happens, the H-1B visa wage rule will prioritize higher wage workers. And, this is aimed at restricting H-1B only for those high wage workers. So only if your wage is above a certain dollar amount will you be able to get the H-1B approved. This is significant. This is a way for him to change the H-1B regulations without actually having to, get the approval of the House and the Senate. So these are a few things that we expect he will do, and I think that's a pretty comprehensive list of things that he's likely to do and Harris is likely to do.
So, like when you are explaining, you mentioned about merit-based, like in the Canada system. Can you explain what exactly is the merit-based?
Yeah, so under Canadian immigration, for example, each point is given, each factor is given a certain number of points. So like if you have a job in the US, you get a point. If you have immediate family in the US, you get a point. So you need certain number of points in order to immigrate to the US. So it's a point-based system. So of course, they'll decide what the factors are and how many points for each factor. And if you qualify for that, then you can possibly get some kind of a visa or a green card or something like that. But then if you have immediate family in the US, for example, if you're married to a US citizen, US citizen is trying to get his spouse into the country, or if a US citizen is trying to get his parents into the country, they cannot do so because he wants to completely remove family-based immigration.
Got it. And what precautions or careful that they have to do for the H1B renewals if they're submitting the documents during this time? Uh,
Right. So it's difficult to predict what they'll come up with or how they're going to restrict H1Bs from getting approved. Last time they came up with many things they talked about, which made no sense, and it was only overcome because people file lawsuits against these rules. So last during his last term, what he did is he came up with something called employer-employee relationship, and he said in order to file a H1, especially if in the consulting company scenario where the employer files a H1 and places them at a different location, most of the H1s are used up by consulting companies, whether they are bigger companies or smaller companies. He tried to put that to a standstill by saying that you have to show that you have the right to control your employees. So if the person is working at the end client location, you should be supervising them, right? And as a result of which, many H1s got denied. He also said that you have to show what work you have for your employee for the entire duration of the H1. If you're asking for 3 years, for 3 years, you have to show the work. So he put ridiculous, restrictive rules like that. And as a result of which, again, a lot of H1s, it was very difficult to file and get a H1 approved. In 2020, IT Serve as an organization, they filed a lawsuit against USCIS. So in that lawsuit, they won. And as a result of which, they had to remove this right to control and the itinerary requirement. And so moving forward, if Trump does come to power and if he does, make these ridiculous restrictive rules, then we have to go to court again. There's nothing else we can do other than go to court because, you can't expect that USCIS will approve your case no matter what you say. So that's the
and
only thing, file a lawsuit if that happens again.
yes. And Prashanthi ji, like nowadays, most of the employees after COVID is like remote, even though they are on H1B, they are doing remote work. So will that be any impact because they're not working on either client location or on the employer location? So remote workers should be like concerned about anything.
If Harris comes to power, I think it's pretty much just going to be the same thing. So whether it's remote or in person, it doesn't really matter. Now you're allowed to work remotely. You just have to make sure you put the work location as your home, wherever the location that you're working from, in the LCA. Under Trump, the rules might change. They might say that you can't work from your home. But that's a ridiculous thing to say because most of USCIS employees are remote. So if they're using remote workers, that's the way of the future. But you don't know because they can be extremely unreasonable. Trump can be extremely unreasonable, and they will find ways and means of restricting legal immigration. So we have to wait and see how that plays out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prashanthi ma'am, for all your information on how the elections might impact our immigrations. And thank you, viewers. This is Priya Goteti signing off.
Thank you.